Hey everyone, so I wanted to make a video updating you on the situation regarding Joe Biden and whether or not he's going to drop out. First and foremost, we don't know for sure what's going to happen, but things are changing pretty quickly, and odds are by the time you see this video, things will have changed substantially again. So here's where we're at right now. There is a report from Axios saying that Democrats are anticipating Biden will drop out of the race this weekend. Now, this comes after we learned that Schumer, Pelosi, and Jeffries have all privately communicated their concerns to Joe Biden about how not only do they think he can't win, but he's bringing down ballot Democrats with him. Now, also, Adam Schiff came out and called on Joe Biden publicly to drop out. So things are changing very quickly. And here's where we're at right now. The latest, according to a Politico report, is that Biden is still reluctant after these calls. So we're still getting a little bit of this conflict between people saying that they're confident that he's going to drop out, including some of his campaign staffers anonymously telling reporters that he's inching closer to that decision. But yet, if you hear from Biden or his closest allies, like Chris Coons, for example, they're still saying, no, it's not going to happen. Now, having said that, though, Chris Coons did say that this is a conversation that Biden needs to have with his family. And he kind of opened the door to maybe Biden possibly moving towards that decision. But he still said, by the time these conversations are had, after all of this is done, Biden's going to be the nominee. So they're not of a different mentality just yet. And I'm paraphrasing what he said here, but still, Biden, even though he is stubborn and he's not saying he's going to drop out explicitly, behind the scenes, he is softening his position. Rather than saying, Kamala can't win, he's asking whether or not Kamala can win. So really, the conversation has shifted from if he's going to drop out to when he's going to drop out. But that is not a foregone conclusion. But I will say this. If Joe Biden was going to drop out, if he already made that decision and it's just a matter of when, I think the best time to do it is tonight, when Donald Trump is making his acceptance speech at the RNC, because you steal that slot away from him. All news media diverts to Biden, because at that point, nobody cares what Trump has to say. Biden is stepping down. This is huge, right? So, in the event, it is the case that we see Biden drop out this weekend, things are possibly going to get ugly. You already see some Democrats playing the blame game. Some progressives, for example, like Ilhan Omar, she's being really careful with her words, but on Twitter, she said something to the effect of, listen, this is embarrassing that all of this is kind of eking out to the public. Things are getting leaked. But here's the problem. Individuals like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, the reason why they are forced to take their concerns to the press is because Biden has been recalcitrant. He hasn't moved. So if they genuinely believe that he is going to lose, and I'm assuming they have access to more data than we do, then they're going to do what it takes. There's reports that Pelosi is working behind the scenes to do everything in her power to get him to drop out. So I think that they're only choosing to now leak to the press because this is the last resort for them. They have no other choice. Because if privately they're not moving him, this is the next best thing, to exert public pressure on him. So I don't know where you go from here. If he still chooses to not step down, he could very well just say, I'm not budging. And that's kind of the end of the conversation. Nobody can get him to make this decision except for him at the end of the day. Like, the buck stops with him. But people close to him, like his wife, his son, if they maybe see that the writing is on the wall, which increasingly people closer to him do seem to acknowledge, that maybe there's a chance that he does make that decision. Now, if it is the case that he drops, I think that the overwhelming likely situation is that Kamala is going to be at the top of the ticket. I think that's the easiest transition. It's the most fair transition from the standpoint of, even though this wasn't a real primary, for the people that did vote, they got the most votes. And so, if you keep her on the ticket, then you can at least make the case that democratically speaking, voters aren't being disenfranchised, right? It's not a perfect situation, but those 14 million Biden voters that voted for him in the primary, the diehards, they voted for Kamala as well. So that's one way to potentially ameliorate any frustration among those people, although odds are they're going to get in line and vote for Kamala Harris either way if she's at the top of the ticket. But here's what I want to talk about. We've been really doom and gloom lately. I've been really doom and gloom lately. I'm sure you all feel the same way. But let's actually be hopeful for a moment. So it's not a foregone conclusion that if Biden drops and Kamala takes over, that we're going to win. But do we have a fighting chance? Yes. It's still going to be a struggle. It's still going to be a tough campaign. But Kamala fares better overall against Trump than Biden does. So with that being said, let's talk VP picks. Who would or should Kamala pick? Now, listen, I think that Democrats are very risk averse. The fact that they're even considering replacing Biden at this late time, it's very uncharacteristic for them, you know? So you always kind of expect them to do the most boring thing. So if I had to guess what Kamala would do, also being in that risk averse mentality, I think she's going to pick an old white guy. Now, it would be better if it wasn't an old white guy, but I think that it makes sense to go with somebody from a state that Democrats are currently struggling in, Pennsylvania, Governor Josh Shapiro. Now, the downside is that he's more center-right, but the upside is that he can bring potentially Pennsylvania back into play seriously for Democrats, right? Because right now it's really a toss-up and it's leaning towards Donald Trump, that he could potentially bring that state back into play because he's a popular figure there. Not my first choice personally, but he is articulate, he's charismatic, and him and Kamala together I think would be a very solid ticket. And one thing that's a benefit is Kamala Harris, for some reason, is characterized as like a far leftist, which is absurd to me. The leftists watching this channel, we all laugh at that, right? But the media portrays her as a far leftist or more progressive. I don't know, comparatively speaking, if they view her as more progressive than Biden, because Biden's already viewed as a communist. But if you bring somebody like Josh Shapiro, who's more center-right, then perhaps you assuage concerns that, oh my God, this is a far left ticket. Either way, they're going to call her a commie and a socialist. So I don't think that Democrats should prioritize, you know, what Republicans are going to say, and they should just make a decision based on what strategically makes the most sense and just expect whoever they choose to call them a communist. But that's one thing to consider. But another person that I think is in consideration would be Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. These are much more progressive choices that I think there's more upside than downside. They really have the potential to excite the base. More progressive governors with effective records, with actual concrete accomplishments, that's something that could work. Now, this is something that Democrats would never do, because I couldn't imagine them having two women on the tickets. I think they would just be too afraid of this. Gretchen Whitmer as VP. Having Kamala Harris and Gretchen Whitmer on the VP, I think that's a winning ticket. Like, again, I'm not going to say winning with 100% certainty, but that's a winning ticket, okay? That is a powerful message that you're sending to America, that at a time when women's reproductive rights have been taken away, you have two women on this ticket running against this rapist. That's big. That's powerful. Also, she's well-liked. I have my criticisms of Gretchen Whitmer, but I'm just talking about, you know, electoral strategy here. I'm not going to get my dream candidate here. I'm not going to get a socialist. So I'm talking about who can beat Donald Trump. That's what we're really focusing on. Now, in terms of my ideal candidate, obviously it would be Bernie Sanders or a real progressive member of Congress. That's not going to happen, though. But I think the most progressive and realistic option that is actually on the table, Julian Castro. This is somebody who is as progressive as you can possibly get on the Democratic Party's more establishment-friendly side. This is somebody who has charisma. This is somebody who can actually competently speak to the issue of immigration for Democrats, which is a real weakness for them, because Republicans have monopolized this issue, and for the most part, Democrats have caved. Biden did that right-wing executive order. Julian Castro is excellent on this issue. He explains it in a way that no other Democrat can. So he's talented. He's also very progressive. He supported Medicare for all, I believe, when he ran for president. Not my number one choice, right? If we're picking like best candidate ever. But if you have Castro and Kamala on that ticket, that is a ticket that is going to excite young people and excite the Democratic Party's base. Also, Castro makes up for another potential vulnerability with Kamala Harris. He has been very outspoken against the genocide in Gaza. Now, Kamala, I think that there is some stink there that Biden is going to get on her that she has to try to wash off. Bringing somebody on who is not pro-genocide, that would really help her, I think. And she also has the opportunity to make her case to the uncommitteds and say, listen, the Biden, administration is not the Harris administration. And she's already given us some indications that she is more inclined to be receptive to the concerns of the base. She did an interview with Joan Walsh in The Nation, and I've said this already multiple times, but it was so shocking to hear because, the bar is so low. But the way that she talked about Palestinians, she expressed more empathy in just a couple of paragraphs than Biden has expressed in the last 10 months. Right. And in his interview with, I can't remember, maybe it was Complex, right? With the guy he gave COVID to, which that's unfortunate for that guy. But he said that he did more for Palestinians than any other president or some dumb Trumpian bullshit. Insulting. So this is something that they have to really focus on. They've got to turn it around. But listen, either way, it's a risk, right? Replacing Biden, that is a risk. I won't pretend like that's not a risk. But I think that sticking with Biden is the greater risk here. We don't know what's going to happen. None of us can predict the future. But we can do is we can be as objective as possible and look at the numbers. We can see that Joe Biden, currently speaking, cannot win this election. He cannot win this election. There's too many vulnerabilities, and Americans just don't think that he's capable of serving another 4 years, which is what he is effectively asking them to do. This cannot be a referendum on Biden. It has to be a referendum on Donald Trump. I would prefer if this was a referendum on policies. That would be awesome, but that's not the reality of American politics right now. This is about doing one job, beating Donald Trump. So that's what we need to shift our focus to. And if Kamala is going to be at the top of the ticket, she has a lot of really great options that can increase the odds that Democrats are victorious in November. So for the first time in a very long time, I actually feel optimistic. I feel optimistic because now we have a fucking fighting chance, if the reports are true, that Biden is going to drop out. Look, Kamala is not a perfect candidate, but does she have a better shot at beating Donald Trump than Joe Biden? Absolutely. That's what the data shows. It's not like a much better shot, but if she actually has the opportunity, assuming Joe Biden does drop out this weekend and gives her a chance to really form a quick campaign and create the message that she wants, I think if she makes the case, she can win. So that's where we're at right now. I expect things to change again. If it does, we'll be talking about it tonight on the Leftist Mafia, I assume. So yeah, things are crazy. This is actually starting to be a very exciting election cycle. And I don't know if Joe Biden is going to drop out, but I will say he is as vulnerable as he's ever been with party leadership against him. And it's not just party leadership. They're communicating the concerns of their caucus to Joe Biden. That is something that he has to consider. And if he chooses to defy them and just run despite what they say and what their concerns are, that is catastrophic. He will go down in history as one of the most selfish presidents in American history. He will go down as another Ruth Bader Ginsburg who could have retired for the good of the country, but ended up fucking all of us over. I mean, if Ruth Bader Ginsburg would have retired, Roe v. Wade would be on the books right now. So I don't want to, 10 years down the road, say, man, if Biden would have stepped down, we would still have X, Y, and Z. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're at a turning point. And there's a very clear sign that sticking with Biden, it's not going to work. Every data point tells us that, right? So I hope that whoever is close to him can get through to him. I hope that if he makes this decision, he does it quickly, ideally during Trump's speech at the RNC convention, because that would be amazing. Nobody would care about that. But we'll just have to wait and see. Odds are, again, as I said, things are going to continue to change, so I'll keep you all updated.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? Tree. Tree.
They not like us.
Tree.
Tails on the bus, go round and round.
Tree. You think you just fell out of a coconut?
Tree.